Holy crap, they actually did it. Sony has officially announced that they are not closing down the PS3 and PS Vita stores. PSP is still going down, which isn't as big of a deal. I'll talk about why in a second, but I don't normally do day of reactions, but considering I made a whole video talking about, PlayStation doesn't care, I just wanted to revisit some of those concepts and look a little more into what could be happening, or at least what I hope is happening. First off, as far as the actual announcement goes, there was a PlayStation blog post made by Jim Ryan directly, at least his name is attached to it, saying that they've more or less heard reactions from the audience. They've decided that closing the stores right now is not the correct decision, and they are going to leave it up. Now, specifically, the PSP store is still closing on the originally planned date, and part of the reason why that doesn't really bother me too much personally is the fact that still, ultimately, all these games are still made available, just not through that specific storefront. You're still able to access these games and purchase them through the PS3 or PS Vita, and I would assume you're still able to load them onto a PSP through your PS3 as well. Again, my big real problem was the availability of these games existing in some kind of format, and while the PSP store gets rid of one option, there are two others that still exist. Now, the thing about this is that, honestly, there's not a whole lot of actual hard information given in this announcement. I mean, yes, there's the fact that they're not closing the store, but look, the store closing is an inevitability. I mean, I thought this going into the last time when they announced it was happening. It was just happening a lot sooner than I would have hoped, without any kind of alternative to serve as a good substitute. And so with the idea of them not closing the store right now, I have a couple really big questions in my mind about what this could mean moving forward afterwards. First off, how much have we delayed the inevitable? Is this a situation where the stores are going to close down 2 years from now? Are they going to last through the current generation of the PS5? Is this an 8-year thing? I don't think it's going to be something that we'll be seeing still around 20 years from now, but how much more time have we afforded? And more importantly, is Sony going to do anything else with that time? There's a cynical part of my mind that thinks, yeah, they got a lot of heat from people for announcing the closure right now. They maybe saw a boost in sales because of that closure. And so maybe the plan is to just close the store 2 or 3 years from now and assume that the heat has died down a little bit and people aren't going to care as hard. What I would more hopefully think is going to happen, regardless of how long the store stays up, is will Sony use this time to create some kind of alternative way of accessing these older game titles? Because at the end of the day, I don't personally care about specifically the PS3 and PS Vita store. What matters to me is making sure that the games listed in these storefronts are made available in some other form. Because again, a lot of these games, if you try to track them down physically, are very expensive, especially from the PS1 store and some PSP and Vita titles as well. And so having ways of buying them for as low as $6 or $10 is something I really appreciate, because I love that if I can tell someone about one of my favorite PS1 classics, they don't have to hunt down a physical copy for $400 to buy it. They can just go to a digital storefront and get it for $6. So while this is a great step for now, what I really want to see is some kind of movement or change in the next couple years that again makes this older content more easily accessible, either in the form of adding backwards compatibility to the PS5, which is something that has been heavily hoped for. I mean, that was one of the big rumors going into the PS5 launch, that it was going to have this, very expensive backwards compatibility support, which obviously it doesn't. It just supports the PS4 and that's it. Yes, you can play some games through PlayStation Now, but that's not exactly the same kind of situation. And then there are, of course, certain barriers about this that need to get overcome as well. In particular, PS3 emulation. Emulating PS1 and PS2, while it offers certain challenges and does need some investment from Sony's part, are not nearly as difficult to pull off as the PS3 in particular due to its architecture. That being said, it's not necessarily that PS3 emulation is impossible, just a lot more difficult and would require more time and resources on Sony's part. Time and resources I hope they end up deciding to invest in. Now, backwards compatibility support on the PS5 is not the only way they could handle this. If you wanted to open up the option for things like actually supporting discs you own, yes, that would be the favorite approach. But as far as just making sure these games are available in some format, whether that's digitally only or not, there is also the concept of releasing some kind of additional system. This is actually something that I talked about a lot back in a video called PlayStation should try the Vita again. And one of the main reasons why I've really talked about wanting to see a new PlayStation handheld isn't necessarily because I want a new PlayStation handheld for IPs to exist on, but I want a PlayStation handheld for the purpose of accessing their older back catalog of titles. One of the main reasons I still break out and use my PS Vita on occasion isn't really to play PS Vita games, it's because I want a convenient way to on-the-go handheld, play some of my favorite PS1 games that were made available on the store digitally, as well as a handful of PSP titles as well, most of which are remakes and ports of PS1 games. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen that Vita video, definitely check it out. It's one of my favorites I've made in the past couple months, and I am planning on making some more content similar to that, of just cool stuff I would love to see happen, so if you don't want to miss out on that content, make sure to subscribe. And so while I don't think this is necessarily a very likely approach from Sony, what I would love to see if they didn't go a backwards compatibility route with the PS5 is some kind of new dedicated handheld that sure could have its own library of games, but more so keeps the digital storefront approach of the PS3 and PS Vita alive, supporting those digital PS1 games, digital PS Vita games, PSP games. Sure, you can't necessarily load an old UMD or Vita card into the system itself, but as long as those games are accessible in some format, I would be happy. Now, I realize an all-digital route like that isn't necessarily everyone's first choice, because one of the big debates that this whole situation has brought up is, again, the whole concept of physical versus digital. And like I said back in my previous video condemning the whole situation, I'm not actually completely against an all-digital future. I think right now we're kind of in this very nice golden era balance point where we get the benefits of digital availability and physical availability. I would like that to continue on, but personally, I do think an all-digital future is somewhat of an inevitability. And so what I would like is for us to make sure that if an all-digital future does happen, we ensure that it's one that actually does work out in the favor of the consumer, like what could be happening right now with the store staying up and keeping these games available. Yes, all digital absolutely poses some risks, and I would love for physical media to stay around as long as possible, but if we're assuming that either way, eventually companies are going to force an all-digital future on us, I would like everyone to make sure that we keep the momentum up on reacting to situations like this to make sure that if we do get an all-digital future, it's at least one that is good to the consumer. Now, one other thing I do want to address really quickly is something that I've seen pop up a lot in a reaction to this news today, which is somewhat of a conspiracy theory that this was all planned by PlayStation. That Sony knew they weren't planning on taking the store down yet, but they wanted to make the announcement that they were in order to drum up a lot of fear and kind of reactionary emotion out of the audience, forcing them to buy a bunch of digital games suddenly and boost sales on these old storefronts, as well as maybe make PlayStation out to be the hero once they announce, never mind, you guys were right, we're going to turn back on this. And personally, I don't put that much belief in this. This is a theory that comes up a lot anytime a company makes a decision that seems overtly negative and they walk it back either a day later or 3 months later. The time frame never seems to really matter to people as much as just being like, oh, well, they did a bad thing that was obviously a bad thing, and now they're taking it back, so clearly they're just trying to make themselves seem like the good guys in the end. And I just don't buy it. It doesn't make sense to me that it works out in the company's favor to do a move like this and walk it back. First off, just because they're walking it back doesn't mean that they're instantly a hero in the eyes of the entire fan base. Yes, people will praise them for making the decision, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to be reminded of the fact that they tried doing this in the first place and that we're worried about how they're going to handle the situation moving forward. It's not like suddenly everyone is going to believe that Jim Ryan loves backwards compatibility and that's the main goal of Sony from here on out. No, he's made it plenty clear that he's not a fan of it, and I don't think the situation has necessarily changed his personal opinion. Moreover, if this was PlayStation's plan, why was the timing what it is right now? Why not announce it sooner? Why not walk it back as soon as a lot of the negative criticism started to come up? There was clearly a delay in time and deliberation in reaction to how the audience was treating this situation. If anything, I think what this whole situation serves as a great reminder of is that when companies make decisions that the consumer base at large is not a fan of, making that known and letting them know can potentially have an impact. The main takeaway for me about this whole situation is that I'm happy Sony chose to reverse course, and I'm glad to see the stores are going to stick around for now. I think it's a step in the right direction, but it's not necessarily a guarantee of preservation still being a lead goal for Sony, and that's what I really want to see be the moves that happen in the next coming years. I'm more than excited to play a lot of great PS5 exclusives. I'm excited for using the PS5 itself, but ultimately, I want to make sure that a lot of old classic PS1, PS2, and even PS3 games are kept accessible to those who want to be able to experience them, because old games have value too.